Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney, and today we're going to be talking about the importance of pressing. Not only the importance of pressing, but how to do some good pressing if you're new to sewing, how it can really affect the change in your garments and how things look and look more handmade and not homemade, as well as the differences. I get questions all the time on if I prefer my gravity fed iron, which is more of an industrial iron, versus my Oliso home iron. So we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of that, and then we're going to go over to the actual pressing board, and I'm going to show you a whole bunch of things and some tools you might want to have and that sort of stuff as well. But before we get into that, today is Friday, which means we have a Feature Friday pattern today for Love Notions, and that pattern is the Terra Tunic. Terra Tunic is what it says. It's a knit tunic. It's got different sleeve lengths. I've made it as a like a hoodie. It makes a great like sweatshirt hoodie. I've made it in a French terry, like little pockets in the front. And it also makes just a great like tunic style top. If you like skinnier stuff on the bottom and you really want to embrace that proportion, it's a really, really fabulous top. It's got a beautiful boat. I've made a beautiful boat neckline with some like fun details and stuff like that. Anyway, like most of the Love Notions patterns, big bang for your buck, lots of variations, and it's $5 today only. And when you use my code Whitney10, you get the additional 10% off that sale price. So you definitely want to go grab that if you don't have that yet. Also, if you enjoy these type of videos where I'm teaching a particular something, up close stuff, tutorials, so longs, that sort of stuff, you will notice directly below the video now, there is a button that says thanks. It's got like a heart with an S in it and says thanks. That is the super thanks button. It's like a tip jar. It's a virtual tip jar. You can just buy me a coffee. You can put just a couple, just a little bit in there if it's something that you have found helpful. And basically anything that we pull from that bucket, that coffee can down there, just goes to help improve the channel. I am saving right now for a new microphone, just so you can hear me a little bit better, something that clips onto my shirt, things like that. The lighting, all of the equipment that go into helping us make the best quality videos for you guys as possible. So it's below all the videos, but specifically the tutorials and that sort of thing. If you do find them helpful and would like to, you literally can put as little or as much in there if you want. It all is appreciated. So anyway, there is that. Also, newsletter. If you have not signed up for my newsletter, you need to do that. We have got a very exciting things coming, and even some things that only newsletter subscribers are going to know about or get. So if you have not subscribed to the newsletter yet, definitely do that. We just send one out once a week, just with some general information. They're short and sweet, as well as hit the subscription button for the channel as well. We've got really great stuff popping up on the channel. Just a lot of really fun content headed your way in 2025. All right, let's talk about sewing. And if you stay till the end, I have an exciting announcement. It might be a giveaway. So hang through till the end of the video. All right, pressing. I did a video back in October, I believe, where I was talking about 5 things that are making your sewing look homemade rather than handmade. We want things to look couture, to look professional, but 5 things that you might not be doing or that you might be doing incorrectly that are making your finished products or finished projects look home-ecky, which was not what we're going for. Anyway, I broke it up into 5 steps, and I thought after that video, I had some more questions about a few of the things, and I thought it might be a good idea to go through some of those in depth. I did one on interfacing December or November, and this one is kind of a add-on to that video, and we're going to be talking about pressing. I would say in the sewing room, aside from the sewing machine, obviously, your next most important piece of equipment in your sewing room is an iron. Because bad sewing can be fixed with good pressing, but good sewing can look like trash, basically, with bad pressing. So it really does make a difference, and it is important to have a good steamy iron. You want to make sure that your iron produces some serious steam, whether you're buying an inexpensive iron, an industrial iron, a high-end iron, whatever iron you're buying, you just want to make sure you have a lot of that steam. Steam comes in more times than not when we're sewing, just comes in super handy. And again, it can even out seams. It can really fix a lot of errors, a good steamy press. So we're going to be going over to the pressing station here in a little bit to talk a little show actual tips and tricks. And I'm going to be using my Oliso iron, which I have been loving. It's a home iron. But I also have, if you've been following along the channel, you know that I also use a gravity-fed iron, which is more of an industrial iron. I get questions all the time why someone might choose one or the other. Why do I have both? All those sorts of things. So let me answer the first question. Why do I have both? I have the gravity fed iron because that was my preference. I have got a completely dedicated sewing room, and I will be going through the pros and cons here in just a second. And the pros outweighed the cons for me with the gravity fed. Really enjoyed using it. However, I do a ton of sewing tutorials and sew alongs and those sort of things. And I know the importance that me using equipment that looks as much like the equipment that most of my students are using is very important. So when Elisa reached out to me, we were at a show with them and said, hey, you want to try our iron? I was like, oh my gosh, I've been seeing these online. Absolutely. So I got the Elisa. I have the mini one, which is the M3 Pro, which is a little bitty iron. It's great for sitting next to your sewing machine. I think quilters use it a ton just to press little seams as they go. Be a great little travel iron, especially if you do sewing retreats and that sort of thing. Really great just to pack because it's nice and small. Love it. It's a lovely little thing, but it's small. And then I use it on the wool mats that Elisa sells. And then I've got their regular smart iron, which is a regular sized iron. It's the one that when you set it down, it immediately pops back up on its feet, which is a really cool feature. But that means you're not doing this constantly, which is great for ergonomically. It's really great. We're not wearing out, giving ourselves carpal tunnel, which can be easy to acquire when we're sewing anyway. So they give me those, and that is what I use for pretty much all of my sew-alongs and that sort of thing, just so you're seeing an iron that is very comparable to what most of you probably use at home. Now, let's talk about why you might want to have one over the other. Gravity-fed pros. I'm going to go through the pros and cons of each, and they overlap, and some pop up in both, and I'll explain why. All right, gravity-fed pros. It is super steamy. I can hit that button and blast steam like crazy. And like I mentioned, steam is one of your best friends with most fibers. If you are using anything with natural fiber, so wool especially, but even your silk and your linen and your cottons and stuff, steam is great. But especially wool. If you're doing any kind of tailoring, like a blazer, this is not wool, but a blazer or anything like that, oh, getting in there with steam, and you can almost sculpt with wool, like a good wool coating, looser weave. I love working with wool. It's a lot of fun. But you want something that's got a lot of steam, and that button on that iron just really sprays it. Number two, it has a Teflon foot. There's probably feet that I could buy to go over the Oliso as well, but the Teflon foot came with the gravity fed. And the reason I like this is it really keeps it, the temperature moderated, so I'm not getting like certain hot spots on the plate of the face of the iron. So I almost very rarely do I have to use a press cloth with this iron. Now, if I'm using a fabric, like maybe a Ponte net or something where it's easy to get it shiny or something with a polyester, I will use a press cloth just to make sure that I'm not getting any shiny spots. But for the most part, it works really, really great. The downside to that though, I'm not quite to cons yet. Well, we'll get to cons in a minute. I'll talk about the downside to that in a minute. Also, it does, because of the weight of it's very heavy, it presses really well. Like it really, I can lay that sucker down and it really presses that seam, whether I'm working, especially like heavier stuff like denim and that sort of thing. The weight of the iron really works in your favor in that instance. It also sits on a silicone pad, so I don't have to do this either. Like I just set it down, which is also really, really nice. Finally, because it's a gravity fed, that means, and I'll show you here in a minute showing you what that looks like. It has a huge tank of water that hangs from the ceiling. So I have to refill that tank of water very infrequently. So I'm not constantly like, oh crap, I'm out of water, and have to fill it back up so that I have the steam function again. It really uses water well, and I really enjoy that. All right, the cons. Like I mentioned, with that Teflon foot, which I could take it off, but that's just it's hard to get it off, put it on and off, but it does make it hard sometimes to fuse interfacing. I've noticed that it doesn't allow me to get quite hot enough sometimes to really press the interfacing, which is great for not getting shiny stuff on my fabric. But when I really want that interfacing to adhere, it doesn't, I don't feel like it presses it as well and gets it as hot to really fuse that interfacing together. Number two, it's really easy to leave on. So there's no automatic shut off. It's just on, and I have absolutely left it on overnight before. If you see scorch marks on my pressing station, those like underneath the silicone pad. So it was sitting on the silicone pad, but that heat, don't tell my husband, it's easy to leave it on though. So you have to be very careful. You know, I've seen some people that plug it into like a light or something so that when when that, when I unplug this whole thing, it will turn that light off as well, just to remind yourself that it's still plugged in, which is a really great idea, but it is very easy to leave on. And number two, even though being heavy is a real plus because it really helps putting it down, if you're doing any kind of ironing of yardage, which we do a lot, or like interfacing and that sort of thing, it is very heavy. So that can get really old and really start to wear on your shoulder after a while. And because of the nature that gravity fed has to be up, I know some people that have put it on like an IV pole and stuff and then ballasted so they can move around the room. For the most part, you want this in a stationary part of your room, so it's not something that you're easily pulling everything out to sew and then putting it all back again. It's attached to the ceiling. So you kind of want to have it in a spot where, you're not going to be moving it a ton. So it's definitely not mobile. On the flip side, with the regular iron, with my Oliso, pros are it's lightweight. So it makes it super easy. On the other hand, super easy to iron yardage, to move it around, that sort of thing, because it is lightweight. Number two, and this is similar to the gravity fed, it's easy on your wrist because it stands up. So I'm not having to do this motion all the time. I'm just setting it up and it stands up. So it definitely is easy on my wrist. It does have an automatic shut off, which can be annoying. If you're working on a project, you're like, oh, I gotta let it warm up again. But on the other hand, you're not gonna burn your house down. So I do enjoy the safety feature of that as well, especially having left the gravity fed on before. And like, well, didn't burn the house down, so that's good. So that is kind of nice. Also, it's mobile. I can iron with it upstairs. I can iron with it in my sewing room. I could travel with it to iron with it. It moves around the house. So if you're someone that has to pull everything out onto the dining room table to sew and then put it all back again, you're going to want something that's more mobile that can easily be put away and pulled out again. And absolutely, this is that. Also, it does fuse interfacing really, really well. Because it doesn't have that Teflon foot. So I actually find that ironing fabric and and adhering interfacing work really, really well with the Oliso. I really enjoy those much better with the Oliso than with the gravity fed. Now, cons are I'm constantly having to refill it. Like I'll be pressing a seam open and like, where's my steam? And then I realize that the tank there in the iron is empty. So I have to pull everything out, not a lot of steps, but still it's annoying. My gravity fed don't have to do that. So I do have to refill it with water somewhat frequently, usually a couple of times if I'm, sewing all day. And the second one, it's lightweight. Just like being heavy was a pro and a con, being lightweight is also a pro and a con. Lightweight, great, because it's not wearing out my shoulder and that sort of thing, but also lightweight that I really have to kind of press down. Like I'm working on denim right now, and really have to give press down and then hit it with the clapper to get it all nice and pound it down. So that could be a drawback as well. Also, when I am doing things with the interfacing, because it stands up when you let go of the handle, you have to stand there and hold it. With the gravity fed, I could set it down and walk away for a second. If I needed it to sit for like 15 seconds, I have to actually stand there. Really, it's only with interfacing, but to do that kind of stuff. But just knowing that, it's lightweight and you do have to have your handle on it to keep it down on the fabric. And then also, I always need a press cloth with this. So unless it's like denim or, a real coarse wool, because, the lighter weight wools a lot of times need it too, I can get away with not having press cloth. But I use a press cloth much more frequently with the Oliso than I do with my gravity fed. So those are the pros and cons and things you may want to take into consideration if you are also in the market for a new iron. All right. Now, in addition to your iron, things that are also important to help make your clothing look more professional and less homemade. you are going to want, and again, I'm going to show you what everything is, but you're going to want a tailor's ham and a seam roll. Those are two things you are going to want to purchase if you're going to be doing any kind of garment sewing. They're not very expensive, and they're just really, I've had mine ever since I started garment sewing, so they last forever. You're also going to want a press cloth. You can create this yourself, and I'll show you mine and how I created mine. You're going to want, if you're doing any kind of tailoring or anything with denim especially, you're going to want a tailor's point / clapper. Mine is a 2-in-1. It's all wood. I'll show that to you here in a second as well. That's a little bit more if you're doing a little bit more tailoring or more like button-up shirts, that sort of thing, when those come in handy. So not something you need to get right off the bat, but it is something to add if you are looking to expand your sewing notions a little bit. And then finally, like I said, that clapper. So if you don't have a point turner 2-in-1, a clapper is really nice. It really helps set the seams if you're sewing with a lot of like heavier weight fabrics, like denim, that sort of thing, or wools. Clappers are really, really great for wools. All right, let's go over to the pressing station. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks for pressing your seams and all of the tools that I just mentioned. All right, so let's talk about, again, the tools that we're going to need. Number one, a good iron. This is the Oliso. Obviously, you're looking above it, but you can hear it. It raises up on little feet here, so I don't have to turn it up on its butt. It can just stay right there. Works really, really well. Okay, I have it on a heat setting or a steam setting because that is what we primarily use. So let's talk about some tools that I mentioned. Number one, tailor's ham. This is not only great for pressing seams open, especially necklines, laying necklines out to give necklines a good press, but it's also really great for darts, making sure that you're shaping those darts if you're working with that kind of thing. Seam roll, fantastic for pant legs and arms of sleeves when you need to get into a little bit tighter areas, and this will get in there and kind of act like an arm. But what it does is when you've got things that are sewn in a loop already, for instance, this is the scrap we're going to be using, but if I had this sewn as in a loop and I wanted to press open this seam, but I don't want to press anything else, well, I would just stick my seam roll in here, and then I could press that open without pressing any other parts. Really great for pressing up hems and that sort of thing on pants and sleeves as well. So these are two wonderful tools to have in, sorry, I keep hitting the tripod, to have in your tool belt. Next is a pressing cloth. And like I mentioned, I do have to use a pressing cloth quite frequently with this iron. This is a gigantic piece of silk organza, which sounds luxurious. I got this at Dharma Trading Company for very inexpensive. A lot of times you can find, and you want silk organza, not polyester, because it takes high heat really well. But what's really great about it is you can see through it, so you can see what you're pressing, but it protects whatever you're pressing as well. Silk is one of the, if not the toughest fiber that's out there. So it does not burn. It's doesn't melt, any of that kind of stuff. So it's a great protectant in between those layers. So I will show you in a second how we kind of use that with all these tools. But this is what a pressing cloth is. I just tore off a piece of the yardage. You can also, like serge or finish off your edges if you want to. I didn't. I just tore a section off there. And then finally, a tailor's point, which is what this is. This is fantastic. Wood is wonderful for any kind of pressing because it pulls the moisture through the fabric, which can really set the crease or the seam that we are trying to set. This is wonderful laying shirt collars to press open the edges of shirt collars. This is wonderful for that. If you're trying to press open an arm seam, or I use this a lot when pressing things open when I want a really crisp set. And it's attached to a clapper. So I've got denim here as the scrap that I'm going to be demonstrating on. When we want to really set that seam, using a clapper, a wooden clapper like this on top of that open seam, or if you've got it to the side, however you have to press it, really helps set that. Because again, that wood draws that moisture back out and into the wood and really helps to set, kind of like curling your hair, really helps to set that crease. So those are my top tools that I would recommend. So let's first talk about proper pressing in general. So I've got just a scrap here, but I've got a seam that is sewn. Hopefully you can see that. I've sewn these two pieces together here. And a lot of times a pattern is going to ask you to either press a seam open or press it to one side. And that just kind of depends on the pattern, really. If I'm pressing things open and it's not lined, I will actually finish off these seam allowances first, whether that's with a serger or a faux overlock on your sewing machine or a zigzag, however you're doing that. Or maybe you're doing a French seam or a flat fell seam. There's many different ways to finish off seams. But what we want to do when we're pressing, at its basic form, most patterns want you to press the seam allowance open. So if we've sewn our two pieces together, we want to separate them, and there's the seam that we've created. And here is our seam allowance is now standing up. We want to press it open to get a really crisp, finished edge, because you see it's real soft and spongy. That looks homemade. We don't want that. We want a nice, crisp seam. So when we're pressing open, and something to note when pressing is literally picking up and pressing. Ironing is this, going back and forth, and that's how we get wrinkles out. You hear that steam? That's what we want. Pressing is we are using our arm, some force to really get a good crease. See, now I could use my clapper and really set that crease. I find with denim, the clapper works best if I'm having to press a seam allowance to one side, and we'll show that in a second. And then when I am finished sewing wrong side, it's always good to turn it over. And if I'm using a fabric, this is denim, so it's fine with the iron. But if I'm using something with a little polyester in it, or, I don't know, a wool that might get shiny, I will use my press cloth and press from the right side. And if you're having a hard time getting that seam nice and flat, you can again use your clapper. Like so. All right, so that's kind of the basis, and that's how we want to press our seam. See, look how flat this seam is now. That is going to look professional on a garment. That is what we want. All right, so let's say that a pattern calls for you to press everything to one side. So in this case, here, let me iron it back the way it would have been sewn. In this case, a lot of times they'll have you sew a seam, finish the seam allowances together. A lot of times that's with a serger, but it can be other finishes as well. And this happens a lot with jeans, actually, where they want you, like if you've done a flat felled seam, to press your seam allowance to one side. Now, when you're pressing to one side, such as this, it is really easy to get things caught up on the other side to where it does not look as crisp. So sometimes this can get pushed over maybe a little bit and then it gets pressed when you want it nice and open. So I always will press, if I'm pressing to one side, come back and just make sure that that seam is pressed really well. The same for this is that I will do this anytime you're pressing the seam allowance to one side. So like if you are sewing a collar to a shirt or cuffs, anything where you need to press all the seam allowance up into the collar or up into the cuff, you really want to go back, jackets are this way, and just make sure you're pressing from both sides so that that seam allowance is going, up into the, collar or the cuff, whatever you might be working on, but also that you don't have anything caught weird on this side and that everything is laying nice and flat on this side. Okay? And then like I said, with my tailor, I use the ham and the seam roll more than anything other than the iron. This is great if you are sewing a curved line to be able to get in there, especially if you're sewing two like a curved line to a flat line. For instance, a princess seam will look this way, or sewing a collar to a curved neckline will look this way. It can be really nice to have this curved area so that when you're pressing that seam allowance up, you can kind of really get in there and turn that to make sure you are getting that pressed as flat as possibly. And again, like I mentioned, with the seam roll, it's really great for anything that's sewn in a loop, like the hem of a pair of pants, the hem of a shirt, anything like a neckband, anything like that is great on the seam roll, as well as doing like if you've had to sew your sleeve in the round, and then or even just putting a sleeve in, and once it's been completely sewn up and you need to sew that underarm seam or press that underarm seam, you're absolutely going to want a seam roll to slide in there. So if you follow along on any of the tutorials or any of the sew alongs, you'll see me use these tools all of the time. So that I would say would be my top 5 tools for pressing, with the iron being obviously the most important one. All right, let me know if you have any questions and I'll be happy to answer those. Okay, so there you have it. That is the way that you can make your sewing a little bit more professional, actually a lot more professional, and they're really easy to instate. Press as you go, guys. I will sew a few seams together and then go press them, just and for efficiency, I guess. But don't ever sew over a seam until it's been pressed, either open or over to one side, depending on the instructions. So definitely press, press, press. Now, let's talk about that giveaway. If you made it to the end of the video, you get to hear about the giveaway. Oliso very kindly, actually, this was an accident. They actually accidentally sent an extra iron over our way. And she was like, oh, just give it to one of your viewers. I have an Oliso Smart Iron to give you. This is just like mine. Same color, that butterscotch color, absolutely just like the one I just showed you above. And we're going to do a giveaway. I want to give it to one of you guys because these are lovely. I really love mine. Now, the only caveat is this does have to be U.S. domestic, U.S. viewers only, and I apologize. It's just the shipping would be ridiculous if I needed to ship this internationally. So we are keeping it to U.S. people, but I try and do worldwide giveaways when I do those. But for this, I do want to give it away. But I just can't ship internationally. So anyway, if you are domestic US and you are interested in entering the giveaway, just leave a comment down below. Maybe say, leave a comment down below with why you think pressing is important. How's that? Yeah, why you think pressing, or why you found pressing to be good, or why you think it will help you. Something along those lines. And we will just do a random, also put if you are in the US. Do that in your comment as well. Say, I'm a US resident and, this is why I think pressing is great. Whatever. Anyway, I'm just going to do a random comment picker to do that giveaway. And so once you have been picked, I will need to reach out to you. So you're going to have to, I don't have emails on YouTube. So you're going to have to really check your replies. You should get an email when I reply to your comments. So watch those. Okay. We'll reply to questions and stuff too, but if you've got a reply on your comment, go check and see if I'm like, oh, you won. We're going to leave this open for a week. So up through next Friday, which is what? Is that the 31st? I think it's the 31st. Whatever next Friday is. I'll put the date range right here. So yeah, just leave a comment and we'll randomly pick someone in the continuous U.S. states, and we'll send it your way. Okay, that is all I have for today. I hope you are enjoying your Friday. I hope you get some sewing in this weekend. I have been sewing up a storm. I have been on a roll. So I hope you're getting some sewing in this weekend, staying warm if you're in the Northern Hemisphere or in cold areas, and I'll see you guys again on Tuesday. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.